Hi, and welcome back. And this is Skipper Sandra. I'm your skipper, Sandra. All right, so today is not going to be chock full of a lot of stuff, and it's not going to be a huge video, but I do have some surprises. So one of them is I finished in one day, and that was taking care of the dog, doing dishes, laundry, that kind of thing. Not really sitting down and crocheting all day long. I finished the March box for Yarn Yay, for their subscription box, and I love it. This is that new yarn of hers, and it is fabulous. It is super soft, very spongy, it's light. It really worked out very quickly. What a great pattern this is. Super easy. Really, as I always say, it's just loops on a hook. My one recommendation I would say is that when you're working this pattern is to use stitch markers. And here's the reason why. You actually work it like this. And so there's repeats of rows. So what really makes it handy, I don't know, I got an itch on my nose, sorry guys. What really makes it handy is if you use stitch markers to mark the rows. So then you knew it was actually in patterns of 4, so 4 rows. So what I did is I would stick it on and you would repeat it 6 times. So I knew if I had 6 of those stitch markers, I got all 6 of the repeats. And that made it a lot easier and a lot faster to go. And then if I got up and did something, which I did a lot of, it was really easy. So that worked out fabulously. What do you think? I think it's and the color is gorgeous. I really liked it. It was really, really fun to do. It was, one of those, we had a really stormy weekend, and so I just sat one day. Figgy's now attacking the end. I just sat and crocheted. It was really lovely. And this is all that's left. So really, this is going to go into scraps. But you never know. Might be the center of something, a flower or something. So that's all that's left, and it's super spongy, and it was so much so I had both of the fuzzes on my lap and I couldn't get up to actually use my yarn winder. So what I did is I just wound it with my hand. Quick tip: when you're winding a ball of yarn, okay, I'm going to unwind some. When you're winding a ball of yarn, here's the trick. One of the reasons you don't see skeins of yarn when it comes to especially natural fabrics, fibers, already in a ball is because you don't want it to stretch, because then you lose the elasticity of the yarn. So you want to keep that. So when you're winding, see how my fingers, you wind over the tips of your fingers, and then you take those out, rotate the ball over your tips, and that gives it enough spongy. See how this is spongy? And if we went through my yarn and you found some of my old yarn before I knew that trick, you won't find them spongy like that. And you want them spongy. You want to give them room so the yarn doesn't get ruined. You don't want to overstretch it, and you don't want to compress it too much, because then you lose that effect of the yarn. Okay, so that was one. And again, this was from Yarn Yay. Beautiful pattern, really easy to read. I didn't have any problem. And this was the Montoya Merino Light, Vicki Howell's very own yarn. So I will put a link to her website, because I love Yarn Yay. I get the box every month, and I won't be without her box. So I thought that was fabulous and definitely a keeper. The other thing, and I know I did a review of the box, or an opening, an unboxing, that's the word, unboxing of it, and it had T-pins, okay? So these just classic stainless steel T-pins, kind of sharp, so I won't press too hard. I don't know if you could see that, but it's just, actually, I used them, okay? I used them, and I really liked them. I don't tend to like T-pins, but they were a nice weight. They feel good. They're not too long, and they're not too short. So it was perfect, and I actually had just exactly enough for half the shawl. So I had to use other ones for the other half when I was blocking. And it does recommend to wet block. And we've talked about wet blocking or blocking before. I prefer to do steam blocking, and I think it worked out just fine. And the reason is because I live in Oregon, and right now, even though it's spring, it's raining all the time. So the weather is not really all that warm, and if you want to get the house warm enough so that it can dry that, if it's dry blocking, you're going to get the house pretty hot. And if not, it's going to be sitting around for quite a while for it to dry. At least that's my experience, and I don't have that kind of patience. So what do? I just go ahead and steam block it, and it works out fine. So that's what I do. All right, so that's that. I just wanted to show that to you because I really did fall in love with it, and I think I'm going to get more of this yarn because I just loved it. So I wanted to make sure I let you know about that. All right, so on to the next thing, and this is really exciting to me. We've talked about how history and things, and crocheting is such an amazing art form. And really, what is it but loops on a hook, right? But our hooks aren't all the same. And we have different types of hooks, and depending upon where you come from, that can even change the why and the how. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So Bosnian crochet, or slip stitch crochet, or shepherd's knitting. And don't get thrown off by that knitting word, okay? It's all right. It's okay. Breathe. We're fine. We're still doing crochet. However, through time, not all nations, or not all peoples, or not all cultures had a word for crochet. So they called it knitting. People in the textile industries, or archaeologists and whatnot, are having to rethink when they read older texts and whatnot when it says knitting, because it's not necessarily knitting. And this is a perfect example. Bosnian crochet. So Bosnian crochet, or slip stitch crochet, is done with, I don't know if you can guess it yet or not, but with a slip stitch, right? That sweet little stitch that makes things for us, that closes things up or moves us along, and which brings me to a YouTuber. So I was looking for good tutorials for you guys that I wanted to refer you to, and I ran across one YouTuber who basically said that slip stitch really is a technique, not a stitch. Well, today you're going to find out it's not a technique. It's actually a stitch. Well, it can be both, because if you go by her reasoning, and I'm not going to mention who it is, no shaming, okay? We're no shaming, we're all learning. But her reasoning was twofold. One, because it moves you across the stitches, and it's true, without adding any height. So if you're trying to get across a section, say for a buttonhole, right, and you want to get to the other side of 5 stitches, well, you can do a slip stitch. Instead of cutting your yarn and starting it over, you can just do a slip stitch over there. Depending on how thick it is, there's reasons, but it can do that. Or it helps you form a ring, right, when you're trying to go in the round. So yes, in that case, it would be a technique, but slip stitch in and of itself is actually a stitch, and it forms a fabulous fabric. So we're going to check that out today. Now the stitches are super simple, and in Bosnian crochet, that's all they use. Okay, it is just the slip stitch, and it's the slip stitch and they add color. So between the two of them, that's how they get to it. But it's not just a slip stitch. So as you know, and we'll be looking at the anatomy of a stitch, when you do a stitch, whether it's a slip stitch or a single crochet, double crochet, triple crochet, however crochet, you will always have a front with the finished stitch. You'll always have a front and back loop. Well, that's what Bosnian crochet or slip stitch crochet uses, that front or back loop. Depending on which one you do is what effect you're going to get. And if you combine them, like alternating them or whatever, you get a totally different effect as well. That's all it is. Now, you're not going to make like this beautiful blanket behind me that a friend of mine, Dolores, made for me. Isn't it beautiful? Thank you. It's not going to make something this big that fast, okay? It's really a great one because it makes a very thick fabric, springy. It's very stretchy, and so it's great for ribbing. You can make ribbing with it, gloves, mittens, hats. It's great for that kind of stuff where you want it to have some give, but you don't want it to lose its shape. And this holds it great, and it's nice and thick, and it's for colder weather, which, hello, Bosnia. You know, we have a lot of they have a lot of cold weather. Let me see. Oh, and they do have where when you use only the front stitch, it kind of looks like the knitted purl stitches. So I'll show you all of this, and we're going to be looking at that. Another interesting thing, check this out. Okay, so when you do the Bosnian crochet or the slip stitch, it has a slight rightward, if you're right-handed, rightward tilt. What else do you know that has a shepherd's hook that has a tilt? Tunisian crochet. Seems like there's a connection somewhere or a link somewhere or traveling somehow. So this is going to be really exciting because here we're connecting, and this is what the arts does. And I don't care what type of artwork we're talking about, it connects us, which is one of the beautiful things about art, aside from doing it. I love doing it, but it connects us, and it connects us in a beautiful way, and it helps us through history. So there you go. Little seed there for your thoughts. And it's usually worked in the round. You can do it flat too, and I have done it flat. Actually, I have a couple ideas of what I want to do as far as like winter blankets. I know, I'm working with the stuff, I was thinking about it. But working it in the round works fabulously, and they usually use wool. Gee, I wonder why. Maybe because it was really cold. Hello. So where does it come from, right? Well, the name kind of gives it away a little bit, Bosnia, but it's from that general area. It's known to have been practiced throughout Eastern Europe and the Middle East. So that kind of triggers another thought. Hey, what about the Silk Road? How did this all go from one place to another? So there's another thought process as far as that's concerned, you know, how to get there. It's said that the Scottish peasants used to use a hook like the Bosnian hook to crochet as well. So that's interesting. That, you know, here we go with the, and my earpiece is falling out, guys. Hold on a second. So that's another little connections. So we're going to the Middle East, we're going to Scotland, even though we were talking about Europe anyway, but it's interesting when you start thinking about how these guys connected. And there's an ancient form of fabric making, or it's called null binding, and that's one of the hypotheses that are out there, that's out there in regards to how crochet came along. Could have been from null binding, and that's a Nordic tradition of creating fabric. So we're gonna be looking at that too. Not today, but we will be. Okay. And just want to make sure that I don't miss anything. Oh, and people do think that it's one of the oldest forms. Well, hello. I don't think there's about anything that you can make that you're not going to, at one point or another, use the humble slip stitch. And I really think this is fabulous that we're going from that very, very, very beginning, right? That very first thing into this fabric. So how cool is that? And again, what have I always said? What's crochet but a loop on a hook? How many loops determine how many stitches width you're going to have. So that's an interesting thing. So what is it good for? This technique, where we were talking about before, is for gloves and hats. It's tight. It's a tight knit fabric, but it's stretchy. So it really lends itself to that kind of thing. Now it does have other names. It's been known as Dutch knitting, Shepard's knitting, slip stitch crochet, Bosnian crochet, Muslim crochet. So again, that Silk Road connection. Old world crochet, and then there's a bunch of, and for those of you from Northern Europe, I cannot pronounce them. I'm going to learn though, because this is very fascinating. And I went to one of the museums in Amsterdam, well, online, and found some fabulous things that I'm going to have to be sharing with you as well. And it's all crochet related. So it was really a lot of fun, and I had to translate it. So it was interesting to see what crochet it was in Dutch. So that you know, again, crochet, the word crochet doesn't exist in every language. So a lot of them use knitting, but they also used other words or combinations of words to describe it. More than using it as a noun, it was more descriptive. So that's another adventure that I'm going on. All right, well, enough blah, 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 blah. Let's go check this out. Come on. Okay, so here we go. Now, back to this Bosnian crochet. These are really cool and funky. We're going to be talking about the hooks. Now, Bosnian crochet, and please forgive me, I don't have actual Bosnian crochet hooks. So this is from Laces. Okay, and as you can see, I hope you can tell, this is very flat. And I actually have these crochet hooks, and these are from Living in the Past LLC on Etsy. Again, I will always have the links to everything in the description for you. But I brought these out. I've actually reviewed them before, but I brought this out because see how it gives that same flat two-dimensional example of it. And the reason for that is because of being a slip stitch, this then allows you to slip into the stitch, and I'll show you in a minute, slips into the stitch easier and keep it open. And so this was traditionally what they look like. This is a wood one. However, they've been known to be made of metal. They were very ornate, out of silver. You know, they would use the spoons. These, you could use these. I've used this. And you can use these. These, I got it off of Living in the Past. There are $9 each right now. The full set is sold out. As of the 14th, it was sold out. So I don't know if it's still sold out. You can check with them. I got them a couple of years ago, and I got a full set for $36. I don't know if that's still the case. I don't know what the price is today. I mean, wood, we all know, has gone up, and transportation, blah, 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 blah. So the cost may be higher. I don't know. But it's definitely an option that you can use. And that clanking you just heard, that's the cat playing with the little twirly thing that helps hold the brace to hold the phone up. Yeah, I mean, that is Figgy being Figgy. So anyway, that's that. This is from Laces. I will also put the link to Lace, not Laces, Lace, the website where you can buy this. And they also have a museum, and it is amazing and fabulous and so much fun. So do you have to have a hook like this? Absolutely not. You can actually do it with a regular crochet hook. I personally, when you see what I showed you, used this particular hook, and this is from Purl's. I love this. I think in the last video I showed this that I just got this. I was using it and I loved it. Here's another example, and I brought these because I wanted you to see. This one has, and I don't know if it really shows up all that well on camera, but this has more of a tip, and I don't know if you can see that with the way it's going into my finger, whereas this one's rounder here at the tip. It's not quite as pointy. You really want something that's a little more pointy. That'll help get into the middle of the stitch. So I didn't use this one. I actually used this one, and it worked out really well for me. And let me see. They did also use bone, just like all the other hooks, just so that you know that. And there's Figgy coming to join us. All right. So here are examples of what I did. And I actually wrote them down so that way I would remember, because of course, you know, my memory 5 minutes after I do something. So this is it in flat, and this is in the round. And it really does change how it looks depending on what you're using, or not what you're using, but what you create, you know, in the round or flat. Hi Figgy, thank you so much for joining us. So both of them, I did the same. Hey, Figs, can you get out of the way? We're in the middle of something. Thanks, I appreciate it. All right. So as you can see that tilt. Remember we were talking about it tilting just a bit to the right, and it does, and even more so but it doesn't take much to get it all straightened out. So with these beautiful guys, I started, this top section was done with the Purl Stitch. So the Purl Stitch is 1 row front, 1 row back. Okay. This is just a standard double crochet, just so I can make a distinction between the sections. This is back loop only, and this was front loop only. And if you really look at that front loop we were talking about, it really looks like a knit stitch. It really does. So see how if you were investigating textiles and saying, oh, well, this is, you know, this is a crochet. Well, this is knit. No, it's not knit. It's actually crochet, but it mimics the knitting. And actually there's other techniques that you can do it. So here is, and I just wanted to show you, this is, see how this really, and it bounces back beautifully. Isn't that, so can you see this as a glove or a hat or something like that? How it bounces back really nicely, and it creates a thicker, and if I'm going to turn it this way so you can see, and this is really fun. So here is thicker, this is thinner, and this one's kind of like in between. Isn't that fun? So depending on the technique you use or which side you use is what you're going to get. And this is in the round. So I only did 15 stitches. Again, here's the double crochets, and here's another set of double crochets, but this is in the round. But see how giving. Now, one thing I will tell you is to keep it loose, okay? But isn't that fun? Check that out. Super fun. Loved it. And what's really interesting too is that it's almost identical in height. I'll be honest with you, I didn't count the rows. I'm just like, oh, that looks about right. And it worked. You know, it was really very forgiving. Very forgiving. So definitely a lot of fun. All right, so here's some yarn. And let's check this out. So it's not very hard, just like you would do in any other type of crocheting. You're going to start right with your first loop, and we're going to start with, guess what, a chain. And like I said before, you want to be kind of loosey-goosey because it does tighten up. And I'm not going to do a ton of stitch. I'm only going to do 5, okay, because we don't need to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I can't crochet and count at the same time. All right, so there's different schools of thought for the starting row. You can start, and my preference is always to start with the back loop. And I start with the back loop because I like that finished edge. You know, when you get finish of project, it always finishes like that. See how that finishes and it looks so fabulous? Well, notice how both ends of mine have that same look. That's because I do that. I start with the back loop of my foundation chain. Okay. Other people don't do that. Other people will go straight for, and in this case, you actually, oh, I already did it, one single loop. You can go straight for it and you just come through. Okay. Either way, it works, but because it'll just bug me because that's just how I am. I'm a little neurotic. I am going to do the back loop. So you just come through, but now notice I'm just going to go through. It's just a slip stitch. Check that out, guys. It's just a slip stitch. And the foundation, you know, the first row is always such a pain to do because that is your foundation. So you've got to kind of make sure you do it right. And again, we're just going to slip stitch it. And again, we were talking about the pointy part. See how that helps? Well, you're going to see even more so here in a minute. Okay, so we've gotten to the end. That's why we only do 5. We've gotten into the end, okay? And we're going to slip stitch that. Now we're going to turn, just like anything else. We're just going to turn. And now that we've turned, we're going to chain 1, and we're going to, let's do back. So when you're looking, and we're talking about the anatomy of a stitch, when you're looking at the stitch, see how it forms that V at the base, okay? So this would be one side of the stitch, that's the other side. If I'm holding it like this one here, okay, this loop right here, and I'm going to tick that down. This loop right here, that's the front loop, okay? If I go over here, that's the back loop. And that's what we're talking about. So let's start with the back loop. So we're just going to go ahead and start with the first one. And did I already do a chain? Yes, I did. So here's my chain. All right. So we're going to do the back loop. And again, it's going to be just a simple slip stitch. I mean, again, you want to stay kind of loosey-goosey. You don't want to get too tight with this. But of course, depending on the project you're making, you're going to want to pay attention to that. And there we've got our second row. So now we're going to chain 1, turn it around, or you can turn it around and chain 1. That's up to you. Now here's the thing. Notice how it was like this. Notice how it tilts forward. When I turned it around, it now tilts outward. What if we're working on the back loop? This is where you really have to pay attention to where that V is, okay? Because if you were going to say, oh, I'm going to work on the back loop. This looks very similar to the stitch, and you're going to go over here and you're actually working in the front loop. So you need to be cautious when you're doing that, because you don't want to do that. We're working in the back loop, and that is how you want to make sure that, you know, look at that tilt. Because when you're doing that, you get that tilt, and you don't want to mistake in that, because then you're going to ruin the effect, right? So that's the back loop. All right. So we're going to get to the end. Here we go. Oops. And I actually, here we go. We're at the end. I'm going to chain one, turn around. Now we're going to work on the front loops, and it's always from the inside out. And that is the front loop. Front loop. Do 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 do. Front loop. Whoop-oo. And one more, and we're going to do the front loop. How cool is that? Now we're going to turn around and see how it's starting to shrink on me, because I'm getting too tight. And that is one of my challenges. I start getting a little tight on my stitches. Is that not the coolest thing? And the purl stitch is just going front and back. So it's really, really a cool piece to do. It's a lot of fun. All right, so that was a lot, right? It's really fascinating how this all works. And if you're still interested in learning more about this, there's Sylvia Cosh and James Walters, who began writing together about the crochet in the 1970s and have written about Bosnian crochet. So you can Google them and look them up. In the fall of 2010, Interweave Crochet did an article on the topic by Dora Ohrenstein. There was also in 2010 an article on the topic by Finnish blogger Hillevis, I believe, Hillevis Threads, and I will put this information in the description for you. And there is an article in the March, April, and I think it was either 2011 or 2012 Piecework. It was by Cat Stolzenbach, who also did one. And then there's a book, Needlework Through History and Encyclopedia Handicrafts throughout world history. That one is really great. And then there's a YouTuber, and I really can't pronounce her name, so I am going to put that in the description as well. Also, you'll get the links to that, what do you call it, tutorials that this gentleman did that I thought were really great. They were slow, but not too slow, and they really showed you what he was doing, so I thought that was fabulous. Anyway, so what'd you think? Are you going to try it? Are you going to make it? I'm thinking of doing it. I'm thinking of making like washcloths for myself. I really liked how springy and spongy it was. Of course, I'd do it not out of wool or acrylic, but I'd make it out of cotton. So that's an option for you, that, you know, or an idea. It doesn't have to be gloves or a hat, especially now that we're coming into spring, summer. But this, I don't know if you noticed with all of those, sound familiar type thing, it really leads you down another rabbit hole. So you can see how historians of textiles really had to think about, or are starting to really think about, what they see. Because what we were attributing to maybe knitting wasn't really knitting. But how do we determine that? So again, having to have these tools and people around who knew what was going on when they were doing some of this investigating in Scandinavia, or in the Scandinavian countries, is what I meant to say. In the Swedish areas, the textile experts, when they were going through the museums, were like, hey, wait a minute. We said this was knitting, but we're not sure. But there were people in the area that still knew the technique, still knew how to do it. So they were able to show them, and now they're starting to see the differences. And that is so exciting, because we're getting closer and closer to what those humble beginnings of crochet could possibly have been. But there's very big variance as to where, who, what, where, when, you know, all of that. So that's something to really take a look at. Are you going to try the tutorials? I would love to hear from you and see what you think. How did it work out? Show me pictures. Put it all in the comments. I always answer my comments, so I'd love to see it. If you liked this video, give me a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button so that next time, which is always on Wednesdays, or at least I try to make sure it's always on Wednesdays at 6:30, I'll meet you back here. I love sharing this stuff with you, and we have more coming. All right, this is your skipper, Sandra, signing off, and as always, keep on stitching. Bye.